Welcome to DIY DEI. I'm your host, Tawanna Streater, and today we will be talking about toxic work culture. In the studio with me today is Danata Andrews, Vice President of Inquest Consulting. Welcome, Danata.
Hey, Tawanna. Thank
Hey,
you for
girl.
having me
Hey.
again.
Of course, of course. We got a good topic today.
We do. One I know all too well.
Girl, let me tell you. So let's start here. What is a toxic work culture? Because some of our listeners or guests or whatever visitors may not know what a toxic work culture is, but they may have experienced it. So what is it?
You know, I don't have like a definition I've written out, but I think whenever you're in a situation where you're too afraid to be yourself at work, where there's fear, shame, it's blame. If in my experience I had a leader who would curse at us,
Yep.
that's
Been there.
toxicity.
Been
right?
there. I was cursed out
Yes.
for answering a question.
Yes. When you feel like you're being excluded, you feel like you're being excluded, and others feel the same way too. When there's no communication, any of those things can be signs and symptoms. And I know we're going to move more into signs and symptoms of a toxic work environment. But if you feel it, it's probably happening.
Do you think it's women of color or people of color that are just experiencing this toxic work culture?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I think everybody can.
No one is immune to it.
No one is immune to a toxic work culture. I mean, that's why turnover is high in organizations. When you see a lot of people leaving, that's the sign of a toxic work environment, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So anybody can be in a culture where it's toxic. There could be where everybody looks like you. You are, raised in the same sort of community. You go to the same college. All of that sameness can still create toxicity.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are the signs of a toxic workplace?
I said this before, blame and shame.
Right.
If you say something, you're afraid, or if you do something wrong, you're afraid that you're going to get in trouble. Like you are fearful, you are scared, you operate out of fear.
Yeah.
That is a sign and symptom of a toxic workplace culture. There is no accountability for those who exhibit toxic behavior. There's no accountability for them to change their behavior. In fact, it's rewarded because they're seen as that's a
High producing.
leader.
Right.
They don't take any mess or whatever the word is.
Yeah.
There's no accountability for the baby. That's just how they are,
Yeah.
and that's okay. People are okay with that. There's no safety, whether that's physical or psychological. There's no safety. People either there's verbal violence or there's physical violence, or there's no safety to be yourself. You cannot show up and be your authentic self. There's no safety in the system. You feel like there is no policies or procedures to protect you should you want to speak out about something.
Yeah.
You can't challenge the status quo.
This is all contradictory to, DEI strategies and issues when you're
Exactly.
talking about bullying and bad behavior.
Intimidation.
And allowing people to show up as their authentic selves.
Yeah.
How is that possible when you are rewarding everything that is prohibiting someone to do that?
Well, that's not a. If
Well,
you have a
that's the
toxic
toxic work-
culture, then you
workplace.
obviously are not implementing
DEI,
diversity, equity,
yeah.
and inclusive
Absolutely.
strategies, practices. There's no inclusive behavior or respectful behavior happening in that. I shouldn't say no. It's minimal to none happening in that workplace.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other?
Yeah. Power and privilege are used as tools of intimidation. Those in power, those who have privilege,
Oh, yeah.
intimidate people, they bully people,
Yeah.
they threaten people.
Yeah.
Those are signs and symptoms. If you're, whether that could be your leader, that could be a colleague,
Yeah.
that's a sign and a
Yeah.
symptom. Yeah, so those are the ones that I think about. And what's interesting is I didn't have to do research on this because I've experienced it. Several workplace cultures. Early in my career, I worked at an organization, a pretty large organization. It was one of many divisions of an organization. And not only did I experience it, I witnessed it. And it wasn't until several people spoke up that something was done. But even in speaking up, I didn't have the opportunities that other people had. I was shunned.
Yeah.
I didn't have access. I didn't have opportunity to promotions. Someone who came in later than me into the organization with less qualifications than me got promoted over me. So you run the risk of when you say something, that something's going to happen to
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And again, that's the sign of a toxic culture.
I had, I worked for an organization, and we both worked for this organization. I mean, it was so toxic there. This person, first of all, she was not a very organized person. She was just rude and degrading, and I would never forget, as we prepared for an event, this woman would have me in the office until 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning. And this is
Wow.
early in my career, and it was said that if you get this, if you work here just for a year, it will set you up. You'll be able to go anywhere and get into any development department. And I worked there for a year. And let me tell you, when I quit. Like, I'm not giving you notice. I'm gone. Here are your keys. Here's your credit card. Here. I am done. But just having that fear of you can't take off, you can't leave at 5 o'clock. I have a 1-year-old at home. So it was just really, it was really degrading. It was an unhappy place. It was a very toxic work culture.
Yeah.
We all felt it. And she would use food. Like, she would fill up that pantry, and you don't have to go out for lunch.
To keep you working
To
at your
keep
desk.
you there. She would call me, order lunch or order a late lunch. I want you to just, get XYZ, because this was her way to keep people there on site.
Yeah.
We barely left that office.
Yeah. I knew in a second experience, second work experience, I knew the workplace was toxic, but I didn't realize how much it was affecting me until my health declined. And I started calling off sick a lot. I felt sick a lot, and I was calling off sick a lot. And that's actually another sign and symptom that you have a toxic workplace culture if people are calling in sick all the time.
Yeah.
It can really affect your health, mental and physical. Like, you can, make yourself physically sick because mentally you are unwell. You are dealing with trauma.
Yeah, it ended up, it wasn't the reason, that place wasn't the reason I got a divorce, but I started going through that process. And she ultimately found out that I was going through a divorce and threw that in my face.
Oh, wow.
So
Very toxic.
very toxic. I was so happy to get out. I think that's why I was like, I'm gone. We came back from an event out of state, and I finished up post-event stuff, and I was like, I quit. This is my last day.
And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say there were no consequences for those actions of that leader.
Absolutely. She was the leader. She was the leader.
No accountability.
No accountability.
Yeah. Yeah. And what happens, when people are in a toxic work environment is people do one of three things. They get out, they leave, like you did. They get by, they do the very minimum. They do not care about their job. Like, I'm going to do just enough so I don't lose my job.
Right.
I'm not going to bring any attention to myself.
Right.
I'm not going to go above and beyond. I'm going to sit right here in the middle so I don't bother nobody and nobody bothers me. Or they get even. They sabotage. That's another way to figure out what's happening.
That's interesting. How do you? Well,
It depends on what culture, where you work.
I know people who just deleted every
A-
email and every file.
Absolutely. Deleting files, uh, underperforming on purpose so that things get messed up at work. And because you're in a toxic work environment, you can point the finger at somebody else.
Right.
Right? So people sabotage when they're in a toxic work culture.
Wow. So, how do we deal with the toxic work culture?
Ooh, there's lots of things. I think if you're a leader in an organization, I think you have to go back to the drawing board and have a conversation among the leadership and align on the type of workplace culture you want to create. What is your vision for this organization? And what, as a leader, what is your brand? How do you want to show up? How do you want people to see you as a leader? That's one way of having a session. Hire somebody to do that. Listen, don't do it yourself, because if you're a part of a toxic workplace culture,
Right. You're probably enabling
part of the
the problem.
You may be part of the problem. You may be part of the problem. I think training for leaders also. What are inclusive behaviors?
Yeah.
What do I need to do to make sure that I'm not excluding anyone? I'm not making anybody feel bad about themselves. I'm contributing to, I'm leading with respect. I'm leading with respect. How do I do that? And then I think diving into what is safety at work. What does that look like? How am I creating a culture where people can speak up? They can share, they can challenge, they can be themselves. How are we making sure that our policies are fair, they're equitable, they're not discriminatory? Looking at all of those things. And then I think leaning into discomfort. Like,
People don't want to have uncomfortable conversations.
they don't, but I think you have to hear from
Yeah.
the people who work there to find out where really are their gaps, where are their opportunities to improve.
I was telling someone, a couple of colleagues, because we're preparing, unfortunately, it's after Black History Month, but we're preparing
You're
for
Black
our
365 days a year. So.
Hello, and that's what I said. I said we celebrate cultural diversity all year round. So we're going to have this Black History Month program in March, and it's going to be a great one. But as we were preparing for it, because I'm doing a panel discussion, and one of my colleagues was like, I want to be mindful that we aren't making our other coworkers uncomfortable. And I said, part of DEI is having those uncomfortable conversations, because if we don't identify the problem, and we cannot come up with a solution. So we have to have those uncomfortable conversations to move forward.
You have to understand to connect.
Exactly.
That is just part of the process.
Exactly.
And but it's a two-way street. So making sure that those conversations are happening for every group in the organization as much as possible.
Yeah, and rooted in respect.
Absolutely.
It has to be the foundation. I think if you have respect, and that is like the foundation, you can have any type of conversation.
Absolutely.
Any type of conversation.
Absolutely. When you're leading with respect or creating a culture of respect. People feel welcome, valued, respected, and heard. It's not that you're trying to change anybody's opinion. You're not trying to have these kumbaya moments, but you're trying to make sure that people understand where you're coming from.
Exactly.
So you can make those connections and at least be able to say, I get where they're coming from. That's not my experience, but I respect it.
Exactly.
And I can interact in a respectful way.
That's my motto. You don't have to understand it, but at least respect it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because oftentimes you're not going to see my point of view, but I want you to respect that that's how it made me feel. And even though it wasn't your intent, that's how it made me feel. And that's why I reacted the way that I did.
Absolutely.
Right or wrong, but that is the reason.
Hi, I'm Bianca Cotton, host of Behind the Confident Smile. Tune in this Friday at 7 p.m. as I discuss becoming a mom at 40.
no, 40 wasn't the number, but now that we're talking, there was something about that. I'm not going to call it a cliff, but that moment on the horizon that was like, if I pass this, it's not going to happen the way that I want.
So, do you think that the Great Resignation and other racial issues played a role in toxic work culture or the changing of toxic work cultures?
I mean, I think anytime there's a huge disruption in your workforce, that things are going to get shaky, right? So the Great Resignation, folks were like, listen, I could get paid more. I could work in the type of environment I want to work for. I'm going after that.
Right.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because for years, at least in my estimation, it was flipped.
Right.
Right? Everybody was trying to. It would be thousands of people applying for one job.
Right.
Well, people became in demand. So we could go out and say, well, I want a different opportunity, so I'm going to go after it. So I don't know if it created a toxic work environment, but I do think it shook up workplaces and it made them unstable. Anytime there is a conversation around racism or any sort of ism, whether it's sexism, ageism, whatever it is, a lot of times it becomes politicized in the workplace. And so it creates these divisions among people. And yes, then there's toxicity because it becomes a they versus them, us versus them sort of mentality. So yes, I think that creates toxic environments, but it goes back to what we talked about. How do we have conversations so people understand one another, so they have an opportunity at least to connect?
Yeah.
I hope I answered your question.
You did. You did.
Oh, I wanted to add something. Sorry. I do think COVID and people working remotely contributed to a little bit of the toxicity in organizations, or either created them or accelerated what was happening in workplaces.
Or put a spotlight on it.
Put a spotlight on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it, because there were so many people there were some people who were working in the office and some people who weren't. So now you have the people who have access opportunity to certain leaders and people who didn't. Or people who had access to one another. So they created like their own kind of go-to networks. Those were the people who had a seat at the table, if you will. And then those who didn't. So I do think that it created a lot of divisions, and not intentionally, because none of us could have thought we would have been in this COVID era, right? I mean, history, yes, we've had flu pandemics and all that. I don't think any of us saw this coming. So yes, nature create, well, it, not nature, reverse, nature didn't create that. But anyway, the pandemic.
It was a blessing
another topic.
and a curse in some cases.
Yes.
I think because for where I am currently, I think we respect that people want to, work from home.
Yes.
We are in a hybrid work schedule. So we're in the office 3 days. We're at home 2 days. And so we have this directors group. There are 6 of us. And we have, on Teams, we have a group chat. So it doesn't matter if someone's on site or if someone is working from home, we are able to stay connected.
Yeah.
We can ask questions. We can engage in dialogue and help problem solve. So that's been a great opportunity for me. And then being able to stay connected to my leader, to my boss, and whether or not I'm sending her a text or sending her a Teams message or sending her an email, it's the respect is there that you want to work from home on this day. I am still available to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think in the beginning of the pandemic, it created that separation, that toxicity. I don't think anybody envisioned we'd be at home for as long as we were, right? I think a lot of organizations, at least what I've seen, have done a really great job of trying to figure out how do we bridge that
Right.
communication gap between those who are home and those who are remote. And there are a lot of workplaces who did not have not still returned to the office. So
Right.
they've employed tactics and tools to make sure that folks are still connected in ways that matter, and that it's not you're on. You know, in the beginning, everybody's on Teams, Zoom, WebEx all day. And I think folks are now giving people some grace to say, I need to turn my camera off.
Yes.
I don't want to be on a virtual platform all day. It's
Right.
all those things.
I'm eating.
Yes. I think workplace coaches are a lot more sensitive and thoughtful
Yeah.
now because we've learned over the last few years what we need to do.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning.
I don't care if we are virtual. This is a virtual call. I still prefer not to have lunchtime meetings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, come
Let
on.
me get up and go out. If I'm working from home, go do the dishes or make my lunch or something. Throw a load of laundry in. Please, can we
Yes.
stop having lunchtime meetings? That is so annoying to me.
I second that.
In the beginning of, I think there was a lesson to be learned for all of us. And I think even though we may have strong leaders as employees or direct reports, we still have to be vocal in telling our managers, our supervisors, our leaders what we need from them.
Absolutely.
And quite honestly, because I was having my own struggles working from home, my internal struggles, my personal struggles, I wasn't able to be a great leader. But at the same time, my direct report was not vocal in saying, I need XYZ from you. She would send me a text message, hey, do you have a moment to talk? But it created a rift. And I'm very open in saying, hey, is there something we need to talk about? Is there a problem? And nothing.
Yeah, communication is a two-way street.
Exactly.
And I think it's really unfair for everything to be top down. I think that's really unfair. That's my personal opinion. I think
agree.
Employees, direct reports, individual contributors, we have to speak up.
Yes.
You have to speak up. You
Yes.
have to say what you need. Hopefully, you're not in a toxic work environment where you can't even say anything.
Right.
Hopefully, you have someone in the organization, an ally, an advocate you can go to and
Right.
talk to help you navigate through those challenges, or at the very least, listen to what your concerns are.
Right. Yeah. Ooh, that's another topic for leadership development.
Yes.
Because I got a lot to say about that now that you brought that up. So as we end this segment, how do we protect our team? We may be working on a high profile, high productive team that we operate great, but the organization has some toxicity. So how do we protect our team from a toxic work culture?
Ooh, that's a good one. Protect.
I used to say, Darius used to always say, this is our bubble. And we protect each other
Yeah.
from everybody else. And as long as we are being open and honest and we are working with respect and intention and strategy, we will be all right.
Yeah, I think you just said it. I mean, I
Look at
really
that.
do.
Look
You
at
did.
that.
See, you did the answer already. I don't know if you can 100% protect people from everything,
Right.
but I think you can be a support system, and you can make sure that there are spaces for folks to talk about what they're
Yeah.
feeling, what they're experiencing. And it's interesting, you said this. I had a conversation with some recently, and they said, I don't need you to go back and deliver this message for me. I just need a confidant. I just need somebody I can speak to. I need a safe space to say what I need to say.
To vent sometimes.
And if you can create that container for folks to be able to share and dialogue in a way that they don't feel like there is any negative consequences
Yeah.
to what they share, I think that's one step. And then, of course, there are many.
Yeah, and you mentioned something too about your brand. When you have a brand and people know how you operate and they know how your work ethic, nothing anyone else says can tarnish that. They can try, but you show up and say, that is not my brand. That is not how I move. That is not how I operate, and I would never do that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So are there any other last minute?
I would just say if you feel like you're in a toxic work environment, try not to sabotage. You might have to leave. I mean, there are some.
You leave with integrity.
Yeah.
Leave with the integrity and your held high.
Yeah.
Leave with the integrity that you walked into that organization with.
If you can't implement change or at least get others to do something about it, and leaving is the only option, yes, leave with integrity.
Yeah. I may have left at the drop of a dime, but my files were in order. Like I said, I completed all of my post-event work, and then I put those keys and that credit card down, and I said, I'm out of here. But I left with the integrity that I walked into that organization with, because the nonprofit world is a very small world.
It is.
Everybody
knows everybody.
Very small world. Let me tell you.
Yes.
I have people reaching out to me, hey, do you know so-and-so? And I'm like, huh? Who? What? That's where that person is? I sure do know that person. That you would not think that I've never worked with the person who was reaching out to me. I never worked with that person.
Yeah, and your reputation
will follow you everywhere.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Don't mistreat people. I don't care if it is your boss.
Yeah. And I would say also, if you do leave, ask for an exit interview.
Yeah.
Because you may feel more comfortable sharing what you experienced. I would hate it would get to that point, but if that's where it is and you leave, do an exit interview and be very honest. Share your feedback. In fact, we've worked with some folks with some organizations who did assessments of folks who left the organization. And we went back and did exit interviews, and we learned a whole lot about those organizations, about the toxicity, about things that were happening. Sometimes folks, believe it or not, are really clueless.
Yes.
Sometimes they really are
and
clueless.
some people can function and navigate that environment, and other people cannot.
Yeah. And if being, I hate to say it this way, but if being toxic has always worked for you, you've always got a promotion, you've never lost your job, there's never been any accountability for you to change your behavior, you think you're doing okay.
And
it's
see,
okay.
that woman who had me at work from 3 o'clock in the morning, that taught me how to navigate the toxicity, but it also taught me how I don't want to work in a toxic environment. But more importantly, it taught me how to navigate difficult people.
Yeah.
Because in certain environments, certain organizations, there are going to be those difficult people.
Yes.
You're always going to come across those difficult people. And even if it's not a toxic work environment, you still have those difficult people.
Yeah.
But
and I would venture to say people with difficult behavior.
Yeah.
People with difficult behavior.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming to talk about this. Has been interesting.
It brought up some things. I might need a therapy session.
I know, girl. We're going to have drinks after this. So thank you for tuning in. Until next time, this is DIY, DEI. I'm your host, Tawanna Streater, and I'll see you next time.